Hello, everyone, to Your Life But Easier podcast. I haven't been around and done a podcast for a while, but I am back today with Bill Pettit. Bill, it's really, really lovely to have you here.
Nice to be here.
Yeah,
I'm here
you.
in Phoenix, a long way away.
Oh, that is a very long way. Yeah, he got morning. I think it's 9 o'clock where you are, Bill.
It is. It
And
is.
it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon where I am here in Switzerland. And it's just wonderful to have you here. And why I really invited you to have a conversation here with me for this podcast is for the listener to hear from the way you talk about our physical symptoms. You like to call it love letters. Our body sends us love letters that somewhere we gone innocently, very innocently off track. And what we normally used to do is that we look outside for healing, for support, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when we understand, like Bill likes to call it, the system, and we understand that we experience life to mind, thought, and you're talking universal mind, thought, and consciousness, then we start to get a different understanding about us and the reality we live in. And I don't want to go further. I think, Bill, I have you here to talk about it. So
Mm.
over to you, and let's see where our conversation leads us.
Well, it is fine to put it over to me, but I was touched by what we started to talk about before, we went into recording, where we were talking about that Mr. Banks was one of many, many people that had an experience of the divine and tried to share what he saw and explain that. And 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 the everybody points with a different finger, but there's just one truth, that a spiritual truth of our what we are as human beings and what life is and what the divine is and how they're connected. And you were saying, you had started to say, if I can, that you had been read much spiritual readings of many wise men, but that the metaphor of the three principles allowed you to see something beyond that. I'm paraphrasing, but I would like to hear a little bit of that,
Mm,
and
mm-hmm,
I will then chime in. But
mm,
I think that's powerful, what you
mm,
said,
mm,
because uh, Sid used to say, "Listen, truth is everywhere. Truth is everywhere, and remember that these principles they're spiritual. They you're never going to find a box with them." And they're a metaphor. They're a metaphor to try to point to the nature, which he says is pure love, and the attributes of that which is we call divine or God, that it's omni-intelligent mind. The whole universe is omni-intelligent. It's omni-conscious, it's omni-aware, and it's omni-creative. And if we start to get a glimpse of that, it changes everything. It makes life joyful and less stress, more joy. I used to do programs called Less Stress, More Joy. I never met anybody that didn't want that.
mm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So anyway,
Yeah.
do you feel comfortable speaking to what
Yeah,
you
yeah,
started?
yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, one of his main books of Sydney Banks is called The Missing Link. And like I said, I was reading I was reading a lot of books from a lot of people, wise men, wise women who had enlightened moments. But when Sydney Banks describes something what everyone talks about or talked about, but is not pointing directly to it. And that's where Sydney Banks is different. He's giving us not a tool of what to do, but he simply explains to us that is how your reality is created through universal mind, universal thought, and universal consciousness. This creates your reality. So it's not about what you think, but that you think. It's not about what consciousness you have, but that you have consciousness. And universal mind is what connects everything. It's the connection behind absolutely everything. And every creature experiences their reality through these three universal principles. And it gave me a very, very clear and simple understanding of how reality is created. And through that, when I went back to read books about other wonderful people who tell their enlightenments or their stories, I could understand it. There is, for example, Ram Dass. Ram Dass, he went with his friend on some LSD trips to deepen his consciousness. And when my son gave me that book and I started reading it, I gave it back to him and said, that was really, really super interesting. I know exactly what he's talking about without taking these trucks to get there. And I I think it's not only the principles, because the thing is, the principles are in each and every one of us. Wow. And when it points to that, it gets really simple. And I can get lost in thinking, in everyday thinking. But in that moment, I have a deeper consciousness and I realize then I'm already back home again. It goes from Z to A. In, like Sydney Banks like to call it, it's happiness is one thought away.
Mm. Yeah.
Mm.
And what you're pointing to, that Mr. Banks pointed to, is it's not just evolutionary, it's revolutionary to our prevailing view at this time. The idea that every human being, at the core of their being, is perfectly mentally healthy. Mr. Banks, says that very early on, and it's not because he says it. There's nothing. People say, "Why do you quote Mr. Banks?" Well, I don't quote it because he said it. I quote it because I've had realizations that that's true. That I would never quote anything that I haven't had my own personal realization. That's true. Not because Sid Banks says it. It's true because I've come to that realization from within my consciousness. When he says that the metaphor, it can only speak about this, the divine passing from the formless to the form, can only be talked about in metaphor because it's pointing to the fact that the representation of a spiritual wisdom that lies within the consciousness of all human beings. See, now, I think the idea that we create our experience moment to moment by a thought is that's life changing. But life changing plus is to know that if my feeling level starts to leave love and understanding, then it's time to leave my attention away from my thinking and to do the best I can to get present in my life. That's why people have made so much Eckhart Tolle and other people talk about the power of now, because that's where, when we're in the present moment, whether you're an athlete, whether you're a mother, a father, whether you're a musician, that's when you have access to a wisdom beyond the intellect and can utilize the system of mind, divine thought, divine consciousness, everything in the universe. And you don't have to believe this. This is not dogma that you're an infidel if you don't believe. But what Mr. Banks saw was very similar, if not the same, as to what the quantum physicists are seeing right now. That what we have called God is the energy of all things in form or formless, everything that exists in creation and the formless energy that created it. There can be nothing separate from the whole. That we are a manifestation of that divine energy. That changes everything. It really does. And it's not what the present paradigm is teaching. And you know we have always have a choice to be in judgment or to be in love, I think. And I choose vast majority of the time now, and want to choose 100% of the time to choose love rather than judgment, because I know the people that have created the present prevailing paradigm have done that from what they've seen, from what they've understood. Einstein is often quoted, whether he said it or not, you have trouble finding where, but is often quoted as saying the problems that exist in the world today are a product of the level of thinking and understanding that have existed up to this point in time. Sid would call it a level of consciousness. And he goes on to say the answers to those problems will never is a big word. Only people like that have had can use never and all and mean it. And you and Einstein said the answers to those problems will never be seen at the same level of thinking and understanding that they were created. There has to be a shift,
Mhm.
and one of the examples, and stop me at any time, Paolo, please do. Don't hesitate to stop either an insight or slow me down or whatever. But I always think of there was a time when human beings could not be in groups greater than 20 to 25 people because they didn't understand the system regarding human waste. So they would, with urine and feces, contaminate the water and people would start dying and they'd move to another place.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then they'd move to another place. Now, and the wisdom of the universe eventually would clean up that system. So there, in a certain amount of time, other people could come and be there. But when people started to have an insight about that, and they started devising ways to have the human waste be separate from the water supply, then people could live in larger and larger groups because they had a new level of thinking and understanding about the system of life. And to think what we're doing now, what's being done now with artificial intelligence, et cetera, from that area of intelligence is one thing. But I think of myself, I met Mr. Banks on April Fool's Day. Many people know that, on 1983.
Mhm.
That's 42 years ago, 42 and a half years
Quite a
ago.
while. Mhm.
I had 26 and a half years of education, 25 and a half, I guess, or maybe 25, we'll call it 25 and a half. And yet I had gone in and out of clinical depression for 20 years. I had seen 6 different psychiatrists. I had done a psychiatry residency. So that would be like a few years ago. there was an article in the American Journal of Psychiatry, and it had a picture of a woman psychiatrist in a chair with her head kind of slipped over. And it told of a study of over 2,000 psychiatrists that answered this study on the Maslach. Anyway, 78% of American psychiatrists met the diagnosis of burnout.
Mm-hmm.
78%. And 16% met diagnostic criteria for depression. Now, that would be like surveying 2,000 electricians, and 78% of them had life-threatening electroshocks from electric shocks in the last year.
Mm. Mm.
And 16% of them were hospitalized.
Mm.
I mean, these, you would say, wait a minute, there's something about electricity that we're not teaching these electricians, because that shouldn't be the case.
Mm-hmm.
So as I sat there in front of Mr. Banks, within 30 minutes, I know you've heard this story, and yeah, I was within 30 minutes, I had the experience metaphorically of 250 to 300 pounds come off my chest. And I really not hoped, wished, I knew that my days of going in and out of clinical depression were over. People say, how do you know that? I just knew it. I couldn't have explained. It would have been something like, I see that I've been creating this with 6 to 9 hours a day of worry, guilt, resentment, upset, overanalyzing, unresolved grief. And I suspect I'm not the only one that's going to be watching this video that's ever done that.
Mm-hmm.
And 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 what people don't know physiologically is that there's a system that people in medicine and in medical fields call hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, that the general public calls the stress response, the emergency stress response. It's via these parts of the brain, and it's very complex and very powerful. And it developed, if you will, as a way for our distant ancestors have a chance of survival when facing a saber-toothed tiger and having nothing but a big wooden club. I kiddingly say because they left their AR-15 back at the cave, but
Mm-hmm.
there were no AR-15s. There was big wooden clubs. So they had to have this response, which releases massive amounts of noradrenaline and adrenaline, or norepinephrine and epinephrine, depending where you are, massive amounts of glucose. I mean, every molecule of glucagon that leaves the liver has 10 to the eighth molecules of sugar, of glucose. And at the same time, inhibits the pancreas from excreting insulin. So, because you want that blood sugar temporarily for the next 20 to 30 minutes of survival, you want it to be extremely high because it gives you powers and energy that you would not have otherwise. I know of stories where a woman in Florida jumped in her 18-month-old, she had two little kids, and one of them, she got distracted, fell into a water hole that had an alligator in it.
Oh,
And the alligator, she looked down and the alligator had her 18-month-old in its mouth.
oh my God.
Now, because of this system, she jumped in, slammed her fist as hard as she could on the alligator's nose. It opened its mouth. She grabbed her kid and got out.
Uh-huh.
Now, nobody would do that if they thought about it.
No.
But because of this access to wisdom and the access to this special, another one, a relative of my wife's, young boy, he was 5'2", I think 130, 25 or 30 pounds. He was watching his father, who had a jack under the car and was working under the car, and the jack suddenly gave way, and the car came down on his chest. And the boy was right next to his dad, so he immediately picked took the car and he picked up the car and screamed. And the neighbor came out and he held that car till the neighbor got there, pulled his father out with minor injuries, and then he put the car down.
My goodness. And how old was he?
He was in eighth grade. He was 12 or 13.
My goodness.
He
Yeah.
was 120.
Yeah.
He's tried to pick up that car 100 times since then. He's
Mm.
never been able to do it.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the kicker. That system was meant to be activated. The researchers, the stress researchers show that it's meant to be activated up to 30 minutes. After that, it can cause deleterious effects because it knocks out the immune system. If this tiger eats you, you're not going to have to worry about getting cancer or getting pneumonia or getting viral meningitis.
Mm.
It knocks out the sex system. If this if this if this saber-toothed tiger eats you, you're not going to have to worry about having sexual relations.
Mm.
It knocks out your ability to metabolize food because you need every bit of bloodstream and everything into survival.
Mm.
The problem is when I was spending 6 to 9 hours a day in worry, guilt, resentment, upset, overanalysis, drivenness, unresolved grief, I and millions of others are activating that same system. I have people that are activating it up to 16 hours a day
Mm.
and then wondering why they're struggling with psychosis or
Mm.
behavioral disorders or addictions because they're activating a system that's meant to be activated up to 30 minutes a day. And it's innocent. And I'll just say one thing and then have you kind of comment or whatever. That's why I say if one understands Mr. Banks at the beginning of the Enlightened Gardener, and I've started the Enlightened Gardener Revisited, as you know, for the course. At the beginning of the Enlightened Gardener, it was the 16th time that I read the book that I noticed I'd slowed down enough to notice that it said note to the reader on the
Mm.
page. I had never slowed down enough, Paola, to see that. And I thought, note to the reader, maybe I should read what the note says.
Mm-hmm.
And I must have misplaced I guess they're over there, but it basically says in this book, the author will endeavor, I love that word endeavor, will do the best they can to try to explain the connection between our formless spiritual nature and our formed psychological nature. When you and I create a thought, it has electrical, it has biochemical, it creates synapses, it can kill off cells and increase cell death in the hypothalamus. It takes form. It goes from the formless. Now, the power of thought and divine thought, that wisdom within our consciousness, it has no form. You can't find it in a box. Hmm? But if we understand any system sufficiently, the whole system sufficiently, as I've said, any system, whether you're an electrician or whether it's gravity or it brings simplicity to apparent complexity. Things look simpler, much simpler. It brings safety. You're unlikely to harm yourself or others with that system. If you're an electrician, if you understand electricity, you're very unlikely to get shocked. If I had to become an electrician tomorrow, I would be dead in 4 hours because I don't understand the system.
Mm.
When you go to the Grand Canyon, which is just a little over 3 hours from my house,
Mm-hmm.
if you have a 4-year-old, you need to hold on to them because they don't understand gravity. You either have them in a halter because if they don't know that if they go over that edge, they're going to
Mm.
die.
Mm.
So it brings safety. You're unlikely to harm yourself or others. It brings use, maximum use. The Romans knew they really understood gravity, so they could catapult weapons, they could transport water by aqueducts 300 or 400 miles from its source. They understood the system. There's predictability. If you have any system, if somebody says, this is what has been done with that system, what will be, can you predict what's going to happen? If you understand the system, you can predict it very well
Mm.
because you know how the system works.
Mm.
And I didn't know that. And when Krista Campsell and Kathy Emerson Marshall and now the Spark Inside and Terry Rubenstein with iHeart and started working with children and teaching them, I think the first four lessons for first graders, through fourth graders, I was not taught in 26 and a half years of education. And the first four in my guidance side, the first four lessons are number one, you have a guide inside. It's reliable. Wow. You want to learn how to listen to it. Number two, your thoughts create all of your feelings. No one told me that. How many times have you seen in a movie where the psychologist says, oh, and how did that make you feel? Oh, how did that?
Yeah.
And it's innocent, but it's disempowering. In the name of compassion, it's disempowering. Nobody taught me happiness is inside of you. I went through 40 years of my life thinking I'll be happy when, I'll be happy when. And it always changed because my thoughts about. And if I did achieve it, then I got in fear of losing it
Mm.
because my happiness was attached to something external to me.
Mm.
The idea that happiness was inside of me was nobody had ever pointed out that. The fourth thing, that I could be going fast and furious in my personal use of mind. And if I just made the effort to get present in my life without doing anything to that, just leaving it alone as much as possible and getting, most of all, getting present in my life, that effortlessly and naturally my personal mind would go from fast and furious to calm and curious.
Wow.
That's
Exactly.
revolutionary. No one taught me any of those things
Mm.
in 26 and a half years of education. Or that, as Sid says, all human psyches are rooted in universal truth, and no person's psyche is better than any other's. Only to the degree of the individual's psychological and spiritual understanding does it appear to vary. And that's what allowed me for the last 4 decades as a psychiatrist to see miracles happen on a somewhat regular basis. Some of them literally instantaneous in front of me. And you've heard some of the stories, and they're true. People in full blown mania, full blown psychosis. Most of the time, no. Most of the time, it was incremental. But once you turn a ship from going this direction to the opposite direction, the inside out understanding of life and the realization of this wisdom beyond the intellect, then its direction is what's important, not the speed.
Mhm.
If I want to get to Alaska from Arizona, it's much better to be going 10 miles an hour north than 80 miles an hour any other direction because I'm going in the right direction.
Mm.
So even as an Irishman, I'll stop for a little bit and remember that God gave me 2 ears and one mouth for a reason. So let me listen.
Wow, wow. Mm. Mm. Beautiful. Yeah, yeah, beautiful. And this love letters, like I said in the beginning, and you actually already spoke about it, is when we have physical symptoms, it just points us again into looking into another direction, turning inside what is going on for us in that moment. What is it what we need in this moment? And
Well, yeah, okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go on. You.
Well, I think it's broader than just physical. It's physical or psychological.
Mm,
And it's not to me about looking to see what is it going on. No, it's about going to stillness,
mhm,
period. Because
exactly.
otherwise I'm trying to figure it out. I'm
Exactly.
looking with my intellect.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But if I know that there's something that life is happening for me, not to me.
Mm,
Now, you don't have to believe that, but if I believe that this energy behind life is pure, unconditional love, and people ask me, "What's your proof?" I say, "Well, you can't fully prove it, but if you ask me what my proof was, my circumstantial proof, I'd say it's dogs and grandparents."
dogs and grandparents?
Yes,
What do you?
because dog 100% of dogs are unconditionally loving,
Okay, yeah.
and 98.7% of grandparents are
Grandparents.
unconditionally loving in all 205 countries. It doesn't
Uh-huh.
matter what country, doesn't matter what country the dog is. So,
The grandparents, it's because they can give the kids back.
but that's because they've let go of their fears and expectations.
Exactly.
And once we do that, any human being does that, even a parent does that, they love unconditionally. Doesn't mean that they don't give guidance. It doesn't mean that they don't set limits when the children are younger to keep them safe. But it means that it doesn't, what the child does has no effect on their love for that child.
Mm-hmm,
And that's where parents want to be.
mm-hmm.
But oftentimes, as parents, we have trouble getting there. But grandparents have much less trouble getting there. Not that, but anyway, but I'm just talking about that if I really come to a realization, not a belief, but if I come to a realization by looking in that direction, that let me look in that direction, and you can tell when you're on to truth, because if you look in that direction, you say, well, if what I'm proposing is true, then this would be the case. This, right? So if life happens for me, and every time I have either mental distress or physical distress, I I go to silence. I go to stillness because I know that I'm being given an opportunity to see something that I haven't seen before. And that's different. That's different than trying to figure it out. For 42 years, I thought this analytical brain was all I had. And I did this a day or two ago. Let me see if I can find it.
And
And I don't know.
that's really the difference, this not trying to figure it out.
Yes.
Because in that moment when your awareness deepens again and you know that it is not about what you're thinking or how it's created, you know that it's innocently somehow created through mind, thought, and consciousness. And
Yeah.
in that moment, there's nowhere else to go because you don't have to judge it. You don't have to do anything with it. And in that moment, you instantly in a place of stillness.
Well, if you surrender to being present rather than trying to figure it out, right?
Yeah,
Because I spent 42 years trying to figure it out.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And many people do because if you're not aware that there's a spiritual wisdom within your consciousness, then why would you not try to figure it out? Because
Well,
if
that's what
that's
we
the only
used to. That's what we used to do. That's
well, and yeah, and if that's the only thing we think we have, that old saying, if all you have is a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail. You know.
mm, mm, mm.
Yeah. Here's a very complicated picture I have of that explains this. Can I show you this
Yeah,
very?
please. Yeah, do
It's
so.
like a Picasso kind of, but not quite.
Okay.
Here's the picture. Can you
Oh,
see the
that's your
dot?
dot. That's your dot again. Uh-huh.
That's my dot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, to me, this is what came to me that if you have a stadium in I don't know if they do in Switzerland that's domed. Do you
That's
have
football,
a
music.
dome? Is there anyone with that has a dome?
Yeah, in Zurich, yes, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So you've got a domed stadium and take everything out of it, all the seats, all the there's just this domed stadium, and this little dot is a sphere, and it's floating around in that domed stadium. And that sphere is but an over representation of what Bill Pettit has in knowledge and experience from 83 and a half years of living. And the rest of the stadium, besides that little sphere, is what Bill Pettit doesn't know, but is known by universal mind. So what I used to do, even when I was in terrible pain, physically and emotionally, I kept trying to go to this dot to give me
Mhm.
the answer. And if the dot had a voice, it would have said over and over, "Watch my lips.
Hmm,
I do not have the answer that you're looking for."
hmm.
But I
Okay.
didn't know that there was this spiritual wisdom within my consciousness that was a manifestation of divine mind. That if I went to stillness as best as I could, if as I went to the present moment to be present in my life, answers come to me on a regular basis. In fact, they come 100% of the time as I need them. Now, I don't want I don't want just the answer for my next step. My intellect wants the next 20 answers, next 20 steps.
Hmm, hmm,
And oftentimes wisdom says, I'm just going to give you this, take this one step. And then when you take this one step, I'll give you the next step
hmm,
and the next step.
hmm. Now, what comes to mind is a friend of mine, and I reckon a lot of listeners probably think the same. It's like I go to stillness, but I can't hear anything. There's nothing coming.
That's because people don't trust the stillness. They want it right now. And they're not really in stillness. They're 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 kind of I've got
Trying to
the
figure
intellect.
it out. It's like,
They're trying to figure it out while they're quite quote going to stillness.
yeah,
So yeah,
like,
once
where's my
people,
answer? Where's my answer? Where's my
yes, exactly.
yeah.
It hasn't come yet. It hasn't come yet
Yeah, why
because
not?
I don't know that we ever totally get comfortable with not knowing, but I would say that I'm much closer than I've ever been to I am not worried about not knowing
Mm, mm.
because
Me too. Yeah, yeah.
99.9% of the time I don't need to know it this instant. Now, two things come to mind that I think is important. If you have physical pain, it doesn't mean that oftentimes when you get quiet, it says that you go see a doctor. You may have a ruptured appendix, a rupturing appendix. You may have an infection, So it doesn't mean, but it means also that you go to stillness and then you see and you may need to go see a physician. Nothing wrong with that. You may even need to be on pills. Nothing wrong with that. Sid would say that's divine energy too in another
Mhm,
form.
mhm,
But it does change things if you know that there is a wisdom that you can access, and then and just because you don't when you're in a really low mood, you tend to I tend to keep my mouth shut because my IQ is not very high when I'm upset. I tell people it goes to -8. So I put duct tape on my mouth and I sit on my hands until I feel better. Right now, metaphorically, I do that. I don't do that literally. But but even in a low mood, it doesn't mean that if a hand grenade came through the window, you wouldn't say, "Oh gosh, I wish I was in a better mood. I'd throw it out the window again," but I'm not. No, you pick up the hand grenade despite your bad mood. You get present, you throw it out. Or if a child is running into the street and is going to be killed by a bus that they don't see because they're chasing a ball, you don't say, "God, I wish I was in a better mood, feeling better. I'd save that child." You tackle that child even at the risk
mm,
of breaking a bone in their arm or their leg because you've tackled a 5-year-old with your 190 pounds as a male or 200, but you've saved their life because, right? So I think people get a misunderstanding about moods, but when I'm in a low mood and I am upset, it's not the time for me to talk to my wife or my kids or whatever. I treasure 99.9% of the time I can go to stillness and allow that, what I'd like the metaphor, the cork of mental well-being. As soon as we let go of thought, the cork does not need a GPS to get back to the surface.
mm,
Cork goes to the surface because that's where home is.
mm,
And that mental well-being and love and understanding and passion and compassion and integrity and wisdom, that's at the home of every human being on earth when
mm.
they're at peace.
And I go to stillness, I think it goes automatically. It
Yes,
happens automatically. When I know
absolutely.
how the system works, I don't have to do anything. I'm
Exactly.
automatically get there. And that's the nice thing. Then there is really, and I what I heard from you when you were telling the stories and stuff is just everything is okay. All feelings are okay. There is no judgment, when I'm in a mood, it's okay. And like you say, and then I run to the bus because there's something happening there. I don't even think about it. It's just that
Right.
that's how it is in that moment. It's all inclusive without judgment.
Yes. But with awareness.
Yeah, with
There's a difference
awareness.
between judgment and awareness. So I truly believe, and I would say no, that the only person that can cause Bill Pettit mental distress is in the same underpants I am.
Exactly, yeah.
It's the only person. Now, does that mean that I never cause mental distress? No, it doesn't.
Mm,
But if I do, knowing that, that's a beacon of hope that allows me to get to stillness, to that's going to brings a beacon of hope to that self-created mental distress, that I'm going to stop doing it.
mm.
The first the first realization is to realize I'm the one creating this. So let me go to stillness, and again, effortlessly, I stop. Once I go to stillness, I'm not interested in creating mental distress anymore.
There is no when there is no judgment anymore, there is no story.
Exactly.
And when there is no story, it just is. So, so when you have, for example, stress, oh, I'm stressed out, and all the effects of it and that downward spiral about being stressed. But when I notice, oh, I'm having a stressful moment and there is no judgment, then actually the stress has no effect on me anymore. Every feeling has no effect on me anymore because I know it's created somewhere, somehow from thought.
Right. Right. I like the difference between, and I hope someday our language, when people talk about stressors,
Mm-hmm.
right, rather than challenges.
Mm-hmm.
If you talk about something as a stressor, you're giving it a power that it doesn't have. It's not where the power is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it's a challenge and my level of understanding is not sufficient to that challenge, then I will be innocently start creating stress. But if you see that stress as an alarm, a benevolent alarm, and even as I saw in the shower in Spain in 2019, it's not just an alarm, it's a love letter summoning me to stillness.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's a game changer. That's a game changer because when I'm realizing that the stress that I've innocently creating is because, and I haven't forgotten the three principles, but I've only, Sid talks about, listen, there are an infinite number of doors of understanding these principles. You can talk about levels of consciousness, levels of awareness, levels of understanding. And if I am creating in this moment, if I'm creating stress, an experience of stress, then my present level of understanding is insufficient to the challenge that I'm facing.
Mm.
There are many things that I used to get stressed about that now are just they're minor challenges. But I used to create often 97 units of stress for every 100 units of challenge.
Mm.
If that low starts even a couple of percent a year, in 30 years, that'd be a 60% decrease, let alone if it's 3% a year, that'd be 90%. So you start to have things in life that used to, even as you get older, to the degree that you identify, and some people achieve this very young, where they identify not with the physical brain body that they've been given as a communication tool for a certain number of years. They truly identify with the spiritual, the formless energy that they are, that's going to be conscious long after the body is gone. So that people like Mara Gleason in her book, when she's, have you ever read Mara Gleason's book,
No, I haven't read a
One
book. No.
Thought? It'd
Mm-hmm.
be worth reading. She
Mm.
talks about not knowing that she knew that, but she was in Argentina and suddenly this young had a gun to her head, was going to shoot her, and she felt complete calm.
Mm-hmm.
And it allowed her to, because she wasn't afraid of death.
Mm.
She I didn't identify with the body at that moment. She said, I was surprised. And what she said was so disarming, the man lowered the gun, said, you're not.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And the same way with my friend Chadwick Mazaza in Cape Town, South Africa, when he was a family physician, and these three young black men came into, and he's African, South American, I mean South African, educated in England, and the man put a gun to his head and said he was going to blow his brains out and kill him. And Chadwick said, I found myself, I was surprised, but I didn't know that I had that. I said, you can't kill me. You can kill this body, but I'll be fine.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Wow. That's quite a statement, huh?
It's quite a statement. And it shook the young man to
Mm-hmm.
where he said, you're not frightened, are you? And he said, no, I'm not. You have the power to destroy my body right now. I can't do anything about that.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not, I'll be fine.
Wow.
And he said, and he got real nervous and he said, well, we're just doing this because we've got a friend who's in prison, and so we're trying to get some money. We're robbing to get some money to get him out of prison. And my friend got tickled and he started laughing. And the guy says, I've got a gun to your head. What are you laughing about? And he said, well, given what you and your two buddies are doing, I think it's much more likely that you're going to end up in prison with your friend rather than getting him out of prison.
Oh my God. Oh.
Now, after they robbed and took all this cash,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
they
By
took,
me,
they took,
the light went off.
yeah. Do you need that? Yeah, better get it to be able
Uh-huh.
to. Huh? Do you need to do anything?
No, 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 it's fine. It's just the light went off. I don't know what happened.
Okay.
Uh,
So they robbed the place, took whatever cash he had, and because he was so Paola, the traumatology people would say that's incredible trauma. He says to his secretary, his administrative assistant, he said, Jeannie, do you feel the need to go home? It would be okay if you need to go home. And
yeah.
she said, no, doctor, I feel fine. And he said, well, then please send in the next patient. And this lady comes in with her little 3-year-old that has a high fever. And she said, doctor, I heard everything that occurred in here. Are you sure that you can do this? And Chadwick said, Bill, I'm not bragging. I'm grateful. I felt total calm. And what came out of my mouth was I said to her, ma'am, that was then, and this is now. So let me see what I can do for your child.
That's incredible.
And now some people will hear that story and they're telling Dr. Pettit says we shouldn't ever get stressed. No, no, there's not good to should on yourself. There's no shoulds in this understanding. There's no dogma. There's no prescriptive behavior. There's no rituals. There's an understanding that Mr. Banks had of the divine and his connection to life that he tried to share for 36 years. And he personally mentored me for 26 of those 36 years. I feel very grateful. I feel gifted. And that's what's moved me at a moment of insight to create the 32 hours of witnessing miracles course that I did live. And now the 54 hours where we're going through the DSM-5 TR because I want this to be left for academic settings, for medical schools, for psychology, because the story needs to be told,
Mm,
and as much as accurately as possible by those that truly were, were fortunate enough to be personally mentored by this man that had a powerful experience.
mm,
And it's an echo of an echo, but and luckily because of things we didn't have 2,000 years ago, we've got videotapes of him. But he was 70. It was 27 years after his experience in August of 1973. It wasn't until the Long Beach lectures that he had allowed himself to be videotaped before, but he never allowed those to go public because he said, I don't want followers. I will talk to academicians, I will talk to doctors, I will talk to mental health professionals. I don't want followers. So it was not until he was 70 years old, 27 years after his experience, that he even allowed us to share with the public these videos. And they brought 100 people to Long Beach, California, and he did a 2.5 day program. And they edited down to three 32-minute, 32 or 33-minute, and one 45-minute.
mm,
And I'm not going to tell the stories now, but I've told them to you in the course. And I had miracle after miracle happen in an inpatient unit be, just by people watching those videos twice through
mm, mm,
because they had different eyes and ears. People say, why twice? Because they had different eyes and ears the second time through.
mm. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
Some people I wished I would have had. They left the hospital 72 hours after they came in, suicidal or, you know, and I wished I had pictures before and after because you almost wouldn't recognize the people. The
Mm,
softness, the clarity in their eyes,
mm,
the vibrance of life. As they let go, some of those people went from 12 to 14 hours a day to 30 minutes or less a day.
mm,
Because they had realizations of the system that allowed them to be in their life rather than in their head,
mm,
rather than in their thoughts.
mm.
Doesn't mean that you stop thinking, but when you watch children playing, they're thinking, but they're not in their thoughts. They're in their moment. They're in the
No,
present.
they don't care about their thinking.
No, they use it I mean, if they see something that they have a hole or something, they jump over it. Or if
Mm.
they see something that they would hit if they're conscious, though. But yeah, they're just in the moment.
They use it for their advantage, but they're not aware that they are the thinker, but they are so in the present and they don't get caught up. They're not in their judgment. They don't judge their own experience. And when we get older, that's what we start to do
Innocently. Yeah.
innocently. exactly.
I think if you and let's say you and my late wife, or when we had small children, say you both had 4-year-olds, and so you were having tea together, and the 4-year-olds were maybe 15 or 20 feet from you, where you could see them, and you're sharing a tea or tea, and you're talking and laughing, and suddenly one of our two children, 4-year-olds, says to the other one, "I hate you, and I'm never going to play with you again."
Yeah.
Well, if we have enough a sense of understanding to not intervene and say, no, no, you don't talk that way to your none of that nonsense. If we just stay with each other, talking and laughing, within a minute and a half to two at the most, they're going to be playing again
Mm,
because they're not. You say there's no judgment, but there is awareness. Children don't like the feeling of not feeling happy.
mm,
So they quit doing it.
mm.
We
Yes,
had to we
absolutely.
had to learn ourselves out of that wisdom.
Mm. There's a very good film with Judy Foster and Kate Winslet and their husbands, and it's placed just in that one room. I don't know if you've ever seen it, and it's about their children and their
Oh,
fallout.
oh.
And have you seen that film?
What's the
And
name of the film?
oh, I can't remember the name of the film. I look it up for you.
Yeah, when you get a chance, share it with me.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
sure.
anyway, and they totally fall out. They're arguing till, oh my God, it gets really into extremes. And in the end, you see the kids, and they're already made up and they're best friends again. And the parents are just completely on their
Yeah,
throat.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much. That's very nice conversation with you. It was lovely, and I hope that the listeners, well, I know that the listeners will hear a lot and take a lot away for themselves. So, if you do have any questions, get in touch with us. And thank you again, Bill, for having this conversation with me. Is there
Well,
anything?
yeah. Can I say a last word? I'll
Yes,
be short.
exactly.
Yeah,
I just wanted to ask you.
yeah. One. I want to be share my gratitude with you about your book on, and I haven't got it, so I can't even say the title right now. Tell me
The
the
inner
book.
game of food and diet.
The Inner Game of Food and Diet. I have, because of, I mean, and I have, yes, and I have pursued this understanding of the principles for 42 years and still was probably 35 to 40 pounds overweight. And I have lost 18 and a half pounds in the 4 months since I started reading that book. So I want to just point to people, if I have a new relationship with food that I never had before, and I'm just very grateful for it. So that's one thing that I'll say. The second thing that I'll say is that if people hear something, they might say, "Oh my gosh, I wish I would have known this in my first marriage," or "I wish I would have known this when my children were small." And I encourage people to please be gentle with yourselves.
Mm,
That the past is the past. There's not one of us that doesn't have some things that we could create guilt and shame about from our. But if we see that that was part of our learning curve that got us even to where we were listening today, um, then that's part of the journey, and that's part of our journey, and just to
mm,
be grateful for where the direction we're going, and the direction we're listening to, and disregard judgment of ourselves or other is constricting.
mm,
Love is expanding.
mm,
And I really see, I grew up in a religious setting that probably, at least as I interpreted, said that love of self was not a good thing. It was pride. No, love of self, a healthy love of self. I tell people it's optional unless you want to be at peace and be able to give and receive love freely. Then it's not optional. It's essential. So I encourage people to be gentle with themselves and look towards loving themselves fully.
Mm, thank you. Thank
You're
you so much for your words.
welcome.
Goodbye, everyone, and thank you for listening. Bye.